بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing on our series on Islam and Atheism, critical response. This week, inshallah ta'ala, we'll begin by looking at and analyzing some of the most common doubts of atheists towards religion generally and Islam specifically. Although their doubts are not catered to Islam specifically, because we know atheists usually they target theism as a general concept, but more specifically their arguments, as we'll see today, rest on the theology of Judaism and Christianity. And this is because most of the atheists who are writing and responding to these doubts are coming from the Western tradition. So their conceptions about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are based on the Judeo-Christian framework. And that's one of the reasons why the arguments and the responses by Western theologians against atheism are not always strong. Sometimes they are, other times they're not, because of these commitments. But we know, in general, whatever doubts they raise, it applies all to those who believe in a creator. And so we need to begin first by understanding the nature of these doubts and to categorize them, because it's very important to know the methodology as to how to approach these kinds of doubts, because there are many, but you will see some of them are more important than others or more common. To begin, Dr. Abdul he characterizes all these doubts of atheists into three categories. He says the first is the arguments which are logical in nature. Doubts and arguments which are logical in nature. Aqliyan, they're designed to attack the logical or rational side of Islamic tradition or any religious tradition, and they're built on as a philosophical rational case. So that's the first one. The second one are scientific doubts or arguments. Arguments that are based from science, or more specifically empirical research, tajriba. So these hujaj or these shubuhat, these doubts are designed to attack the existence of God through science, because again, this is the most important for them, the most important subject. With the intellect, they go together. And the third one, he says, are emotional arguments. So these are doubts, these are arguments which are emotional. And it's interesting because using emotional, atifi arguments doesn't really sound very academic. But as we'll see, this categorization is important, but it's only taqribi. It's just approximate categorization. Meaning some arguments can be formed logically, some of them formed emotionally. The same argument can be formed in different ways. So you must understand that it's just like a taqrib, a kind of example of what the overarching image looks like. But the reason why it's important to know that such things as emotional arguments, most common and the most effective, you may argue, arguments that they present are emotional. As we'll see, the problem of evil, it can be divided into levels, but the one that they use, the way that is popularized in our culture, is an emotional argument. The problem of hell, we're going to get that later. Is it really a problem, right? This is what they call it. It's an emotional argument. And we must understand the human nature. Once you understand that their arguments appeal to the human nature and emotion, so too does da'i have to know the power of emotion. No, it's all not all rational. It's not all rational. So that's how Dr. Swady, he divides it. From the atheists now, we're going to see how they divide their arguments. Philosopher, the atheist philosopher Paul Draper, he says that all arguments for atheism are two types: logical and evidential. Okay, so this is now an atheist, right, saying generally these are two categories. Logical arguments attempt to show that the concept of God is self-contradictory or logically inconsistent with some known fact. So we're going to analyze today logical arguments. So Paul Draper, right, a well-known atheist, he says logical arguments are arguments designed to show that the concept of God is self-contradictory or logically inconsistent. Means the way the theists believe about God logically doesn't make sense. And we're going to see what are these arguments. And the second line of reasoning, evidential arguments. That means arguments that attempt to show that certain known facts that are consistent with theism nevertheless provide evidence against it. Known facts that are consistent with theism, but still they prove against it. So evidential arguments are mostly scientific. Evolution, the Big Bang, those ones are evidential. Logical, as we'll see, are more philosophical. So essentially, logical arguments, their goal is to make the concept of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inconsistent or logically impossible or self-contradictory, and this is what they're trying to attack the aqeedah of the theist. The second one, evidential, what they'll do is they'll bring some hard fact, usually in science, that is compatible on face value or can be compatible with theism, but what they'll do, they say that it's too much. This argument is overwhelming. This fact is too much. Given this fact is true, that God can be real or can exist. So I'll give you an example. The problem of evil can be made logically or evidentially. They can make it either way. So we'll see later that, like I said, they can change it, but the surah can change. The surah, how they're going to present it, but the qasd, the intent behind it, the maqasid are always the same. One is going to attack the concept of Allah, another one's going to try to make it His existence improbable. You may say the first one, logical arguments are designed to make God's existence impossible, and the second one are designed to make it improbable. And the reason why it's important is because, as you can see, the gradation of how they approach. If they can't prove it's impossible, they try to make it improbable. Possible, but not so much. And the reason why it's important because some atheists, they change the bar all the way down there. They move the bar to a stalemate. Someone say, okay, look, it's 50-50. He could exist, could not exist. And the reason I'm saying this is because when you see these kinds of argumentation, you can also see why they're doing it. Because can anyone really say Allah doesn't exist? Right? This is a far-fetched. In fact, you may argue logical arguments are very weak, right? Because that's why they tend to live in the evidential area. And good, we have to remember, as Muslims, it's impossible for mankind to disprove Allah. Our existence, the delil of His existence. قُلَّ فِي اللَّهِ شَكْ. Say is a doubt about Allah. So we're going to see at the end of this that really, someone who's talking that confidently, they know better. And I'm going to talk about later some of the atheists who try to come way down, lower the standard. Okay, now that we know this, we have to understand some of the manhaj, right? The manhaj, the methodology that they use. Since atheists believe in certain key principles and assumptions and beliefs, their doubts will always emerge from these. And the two most important ones are, number one, ta'zeem al-aql. Because they venerate the aql, ta'zeem al-aql we mentioned, that's a principle of the atheist, the foundation. They venerate, when I say venerate, I mean they go into ghulu, extremism, right, in terms of the intellect and its rational capacities. So the hyper-rational. So a lot of the arguments then will be logical. Number two, they are scientists, not scientists like science, scientism. So they make ta'zeem al-tajriba wal-ulum. Sciences and scientific inquiry, they make it venerated. Hence, they are going to rest their case on science. So therefore, their methodology of their doubts rest on their aqeedah. قُلْ كُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِهِ. Allah says, everyone works in accordance to his worldview. Pay attention, brothers and sisters. That's in Surah Isra. It's a minhaj. That's important. Everyone works within his worldview and framework. Muslim from the Aqeedah Islamiyya, Christian from Christianity, and the atheist from his batil atheism. There's no one who's going to operate outside that apparatus. So I'm saying this because if you know where he's working from, you know where to go. You know how to get it. And we're also going to see that since they have these two major, amongst other principles, their foundation, their epistemology, ways of knowing are reductive. Very reductive. They reduced it to a few. So therefore, the arguments are going to become daif, weak, because how is it possible to make cases using, in this case, faulty, because man-made, mistake-prone, created tools, in this case, man-made research, human intellect, to disprove the creator who is the foundation of it? It's not ma'qul. It doesn't make any sense. And we know the qa'idah principle, ما بني على الباطل فهو باطل. Whatever is built upon batil, falsehood or fasad, huwa fasad. It's batil. And whatever is built upon falsehood is falsehood. If you built your house on shaky ground, it's not going very high. And I'm saying this because you must pay attention to, when they're presenting the argument, just pay attention to where is it coming from, how is it being set up, what are the assumptions they're not telling us. And so before getting into some of the arguments, I must say now that most of their arguments, they suffer from fallacies, right? Fallacies and contradictions, because that's the nature of anyone who follows batil, is always falling into contradictions and fallacies. Shaykh Sulayman he says about the people who over oppose the truth, he will be tested, he will be afflicted with following contradiction and differing and being upon non-clarity. إِنَّهُمْ لَفِي قَوْلٍ مُخْتَلِفٍ يُؤْفَكُ عَنْهُ مَنْ أُفِكَ. That's the dalil. And you, all Quraysh, are in different opinions about the Quran and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, differing therein, don't have no certainty in what you're saying. So one is going to say this, one's going to say that. Same thing with them. One is going to say this argument there. He's all over the place. They have nothing. And so the rule is, if you oppose the truth, you'll be tested and afflicted with contradiction and batil. You have no way out. And therefore, what are the two major fallacies that all the arguments fall into? You must, if you know it now, you'll understand, inshallah ta'ala, all the arguments. Okay, I'm going to present them now before we go into them. The first fallacy: they resemble Allah to His creation. Every logical argument they make suffers from tashbihul khaliq bil makhluq, resembling the creator to the creation. And we know, as Ibn Qayyim says in Dar al-Salikin, that's ayn al-shirk. That's asl al-shirk. Tashbih al-khaliq bil makhluq wal makhluq bil khaliq. The origin of polytheism, and the atheist is a polytheist. Right? Remember we said that? He's a polytheist. He denies Allah's existence, so therefore naturally he confirms those qualities for Allah and his actions other than Him. It suffers from resembling the creator to the creation to the creator. And you will see yourself. So all logical arguments, tashbihul khaliq bil makhluq. Tashbih al-khaliq bil makhluq. Very important to know that. So whenever you analyze it, I'm going to give you some examples today. You're going to look at it and say, what is this? Why this is not going to work. Number two, they use Allah's actions, the af'al of Allah, to disprove His wujud, His existence. So what happens? They take Allah's actions, in this case khalq, Allah's creation of the universe, and they use His af'al to oppose His wujud, His existence. When actually His af'al, His actions, and the creation that comes from it are the dalil of His existence. And Hafid ibn Jawzi taught us this. Because they couldn't see Allah, the fa'il, then they saw instead His actions, they forgot the fa'il and affirmed the fi'il. And we know there's no fi'il bidun fa'il. So what is this? You tell them about all evolution, mechanism, fi'il, and maf'ul. Where is the fa'il? No answer. See, we're going to say yes. All this you're talking about, whatever it is, it's only showing us a makhluq, a creation, which is makhluq. Therefore it came from fi'il, an action of a fa'il. Who made it? They're going to use the fi'il, af'al of Allah against His existence, which makes no sense. And they're going to be punished with the outcome of affirming a creation without a creator, or action without an actor. And we're going to see. And Ibn Jawzi meant to say this point, very subtle, very powerful. So for example, if they're going to say science is a scientific inquiry, is an inquiry of what? God's creation. Allah is the creation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created creation. And the Quran is Allah's speech. Is there a contradiction between Allah's speech and His creation? Allah lahu al-khalq wal-amr. Doesn't Allah have the creation, wal-amr, wahi? So you're going to tell me Allah's fi'l and His aqwal and af'al are opposing each other? It's funny, right? They're going to say Quran is wrong based on Allah's af'al. Well, that's Allah's af'al, His aqwal. They're going to go together. You have to understand this because, as we'll see next week and when we talk about evidential arguments, once you get to the bottom of what they're really arguing, they have nothing. Remember, the case to oppose is easier than to build. Their job when they come with shubuhat is to knock down, not to build. As we'll see, they don't have anything they're going to build on. They're just going to knock you. They're going to try to bring your structure down, or at least create some cracks in the foundation and run for it, because they don't have much to bring. But if you understand why they're coming from you, then at least you're going to understand. Okay, I know how to respond to them. Let's talk about logical arguments today. There are many, but I'm going to focus on, if Allah gives us enough time, the major ones. And the logical arguments, brothers and sisters, are very important just to be aware of them. Otherwise, their effectiveness, even in public discourse, is not very strong. In fact, you may argue these are more arguments found in academia, more than the awam. So the first of the logical arguments are what are called impossibility arguments, or incompatible property arguments. The arguments here, they call the impossibility arguments, or sometimes the incompatible properties of God, or some of us we know them as the paradoxes. That's probably the more common one, the paradoxes. And as soon as you hear the word paradox, you already know it's not something you have to answer. It's a contradiction in itself. That's the jawab, that's the answer to the whole everything. When you hear paradox, khalas, it's already about it. You don't have to answer. And I'm going to show you why. Because once you don't know that, you got to come in there, you got to catch you between a false dilemma, and you got to be caught, you're going to be the victim. So, what are the impossibility arguments? According to the Cambridge Companion to Atheism, they are a priori argument, or an a priori argument against the existence of God that purports to show the concept of God is inconsistent. In other words, they are supposed to be rudimentary or fundamental arguments to show Allah's existence is inconsistent or impossible or incompatible. Means Allah and His attributes put together doesn't make sense aqlan. It's not possible logically for Him to exist with the attribute that He has. That's called the impossibility argument. So they're going to try to take Allah's attributes and His existence and His names, and they're going to try to pit it against one another, which is already problematic, right? Before continuing, we should know now the power of studying the beautiful names and attributes of Allah. This is where Aqidah intersects with da'wah. Because in order to answer these impossible doubts, you have to have strong Aqidah. Right? So some people will come to you and say, well, we study Aqidah, atheists there. Well, you don't study Aqidah, you can't talk to atheists. Right? Because we want to know your answer. And we don't want to talk about al-bid'ah. They have some nonsense answers. Because if they present their arguments, they're going to make Islam look bad. Hence, the correct Aqidah means you first know who Allah is correctly, then you can respond. And that's what Shaykh Abdullah mentioned. The majority of the mistakes the Christians make and Jews is because the Aqidah itself is batil. They in themselves fall into shirk fi asma wa sifat, so they can't really answer very well. Means they do a lot of critique. When it comes to their approval, Jesus is a man, he's God, and this one's saying God is described as a man. They both have a problem. So what is the benefit for us to know? The arguments which are called impossibility arguments, under them are many. We're going to begin with the first one called the omnipotence paradox. Omnipotence is a fancy word talking about Allah's qudrah, Allah's ability. So the omnipotence paradox. Well, I mean, most of us are familiar with the paradox, but the term we don't know. And we just have to use the salahat, the terminology of these people, so at least we know it. So it's called the omnipotence paradox. Omnipotence means Allah being Al-Qadir, Al-Qadir, Qudrah, Allah's ability. So when you say omni means all. So that's important. Omni means all. So omnipotent, all powerful. Omniscient, all knowing. Omnibenevolent, all good. It means just omni just means all. So when you're reading them, you don't know what they're saying. That's another problem. That's why I said this is more for the academics, or at least the idea of it. But some of the surah, like the first one we're going to talk about right now, it kind of came to the public. So what is an example? The omnipotence paradox, one of the formations. If God can be, is it possible for God to make a stone or rock that He cannot lift? And He is not all powerful, if the answer is yes. And if the answer is that no, so if the answer is He can't, then He's not all powerful. And if the answer is He can, that means He's lacking power. Either way, Allah is not all powerful. It means if He's too big for Him to carry the rock, imagine Allah created a rock too heavy for Him to carry. If He can't carry it, He's not Qadir, not Qadir, and all powerful, omnipotent. And if He can, that means He creates something He can't carry, so it's also the same thing. So paradox is going to always fall in the same. It's going the same way. It makes you choose between a false dilemma. It's A or B. So what do you have to remember? Whenever you hear paradox, it's always a C. Right, guys? Split the paradox. Never go for it, right? That's important. When they say dilemma, trilemma, it's okay. If there's two, there was three. False dilemma, A or B. Nope, it's C. So when they say this, we tell them, first of all, this one, it's already contradictory, as we'll see. It's a very old argument. Ibn Rushd al-Hafid, here in died 595 Hijri, he addressed this in his book Tahafut, the incoherence of the incoherence. His response to Ghazali. Ibn Rushd, he already discussed this amongst the early scholars who discussed this dilemma. And Ibn Rushd, again, is both philosopher and jurist. And so what is the purpose of this paradox? That can God create a stone so heavy He can't carry? Or anything along those lines? It's designed to undermine Allah's attribute of being all-powerful. But in reality, it's a false argument. It's a paradox. And so where does the mistake come from? The meaning of Qudrah. And Allah being Al-Qadir wal-Qadir. So what does it mean, Allah ala kulli shayin Qadir? Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we say, it means Allah is able to do all things which are possible. As for those things which are logically impossible, and those which are impossible, right? Means cannot happen. Then it's illogical, and therefore it's not something Allah can do because itself is impossible. It's not something. And therefore the ulama, when they address this issue, the first thing you have to do, you have to explain modalities. Possible versus impossible. Okay, so when they say, can Allah create a stone so big He can't lift, you can see the problem with it. Can Allah, and then cannot. Right, so it has those two elements. Can Allah create a stone so heavy He cannot lift? Cannot. That's ta'arud. It's already a tanaqud. It's already a contradiction. So before addressing it, you can see the problem. Shaykh Abdul Karim al-Khudairi says in his ta'liqat and wasatiyah that some of them, they say the example, is God capable of creating a stone which He cannot break? Again, they have different wordings. He says, verily the words capable and not capable in one sentence are coming together as a contradiction. It is impossible. That which is possible is not considered something. That which is not possible is not considered something. Therefore, it doesn't enter his statement, Allah ala kulli shayin Qadir. As we're going to see the answer now. So look how beautifully the Shaykh answers that. The fact that the statement says, can He, and it cannot. That's already a contradiction. Can He, cannot. So what happens? Most of us, we hear this, YouTube, whatever. You already know, whoever is asking you that, it's batil, and it's batil. You don't need to give a jawab. Because what kind of doubt is that? It's contradiction. So therefore, it's a paradox for a reason. It's only designed to put you in a bad place. To put you in a dilemma. Because if you say A or B, you look bad. You have to first say the question is invalid, and I'm going to answer why. طيب, what's our aqidah to begin with? The qudra of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ahlul Sunnah al-Jama'ah, they say, Imam al-Safarini, he writes in his manzumah, بِقُدْرَةٍ تَعَلَّقَتْ بِمُمْكِنٍ كَذَا إِرَادَةٌ فَعِي وَاسْتَبِنٍ. And Allah's ability is connected to possibilities. Likewise is His will, so understand and clarify. Line number 37. And our teacher Al-Fajr, he taught this poem, right? Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen commenting on Safarini, Sharh Aqeedah Safariniyah, he says, the impossibilities which we cannot conceive in our minds are two types. Something which is impossible in and of itself, so we call it mustahil lidatihi, and something which is impossible due to other reasons, mustahil li ghayrihi. Okay, it's very important, these discussions of Aqeedah. When we say Allah ala kulli shay'in Qadir, we're talking about possibilities, mumkinat, not mustahilat. Because something impossible is not something to begin with, it just doesn't exist. But the problem, we're going to find out where the atheist is coming from. He's doing it on purpose, it's something that he's making a mistake in. Our belief is something is impossible in and of itself, is called mustahil lidatihi, in and of itself. A square triangle. Mustahil aqlan, it's not possible lidatihi. It can't be a square and a triangle at the same time. A married bachelor. Right? Someone could say, can Allah make a married bachelor? Mustahil aqlan lidatihi. It's not a shay. You can't be married and unmarried at the same time. Right? A moving still. These are examples I'm not giving. Mustahil lidatihi. And then there's something mustahil li ghayrihi. Means something is impossible only due to another reason. Means can a kafir become a Muslim? Yes, if he leaves kufr. Yes. But if he doesn't, it's because he continues on kufr. You can't be a mu'min while upon kufr. But you can get out of kufr and become mu'min. You can't be in state of wudu, right? State of hadith until you make wudu. But when you're in state of hadith, it's possible if you make wudu. But if someone can say, while in state of hadith, when I broke my wudu, can I be in wudu? Not now, you have to make wudu. But that's for other reasons, not like the first case. طيب, Shaykh Uthaymin now says that for something impossible in and of itself, then if someone said, is Allah capable of creating someone like Him? Right, atheists also say, can God create a God like Him? Right, question is impossible, he says, it's impossible. However, Allah is capable of creating a creation greater than the creation that we know now, and we know now that the greatest creation of Allah is the throne. So Allah can create something bigger than the Arsh, but nothing greater than Him. And it's also, brothers and sisters, it's already mustahil. Why? Impossible. If Allah created it, it's already a creation. I go to tafsir in Surah Yunus. Allah talks about Isa. Christians always say, can God create? God could do all things, right? He can make a son, right? No. If he's saying He's going to create a son, He doesn't need one. But if He said if He created a son, He's going to become God, it's also impossible because He created makhluq, laysa khariq. And it's not possible for something to be makhluq wala khariq, or they believe khariq and makhluq. Right? Atheists, the Christians too, that's the problem with them. They say God could do all things. Can He have a son? They're mixing up so many levels of problems. First, if you say He has a son, Allahu ghani, He doesn't need one. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He's not like us. And number two, if He had a son, what is He? They're going to say He's a God too. How can He be created? Right? And then they say God is all eternal, right? طيب, if you understand this, let's come back to the tafsir of the ayah. Wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. What shay mean? Mumkin. Allah can create all possible things, not things which are impossible. Why? Because things which are impossible don't exist. If it's with me so far, Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, he addresses these issues as well in his book جواب الاعتراضات المصرية على فتيا الحموية. So Ibn Taymiyyah, when he wrote his Fatawa al-Hamawiyya, one of the people bid'ah responded to him, so he wrote his book جواب الاعتراضات, which is like, well, most of it is lost, subhanAllah, but what is remaining with us. In there, page 121, he says one day, one of the Muluk al-Hind, one of the Indian kings, he brought one of this doubt to one of the Muslims at the time of Harun Rashid, and he said to them, هل يستطيع ربك, is it possible for your Lord يخلق مثل نفسه, to create something like himself? And he said, if you say yes, then Allah made someone like him, and if you say no, then Allah is not capable. Right? So Ibn Taymiyyah is mentioning the story. So he said, Ibn Taymiyyah, this scholar said that this question is impossible in of itself, right? Because and Allah's ability relies on that and rests on that which is possible. And he mentioned that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates something like himself, then we'll have to assume that there's going to be two creators, which is impossible. And we'll also assume that because it's created, then it can't become a creator. And then so when he present this argument, فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرْ, right? The kafir became quiet. Right? So Ibn Taymiyyah says, هذا الجواب السديد. It's a good answer, he says. فإن السائل فرض اجتماع, then he continues explaining it. So page 121, جواب اعتراضات المصرية على فتيا الحموية, he mentions this. And the reason why it's important to know that is because, again, it's old, these doubts. So how do we explain this? If someone says, can God do something that he cannot do after? It's based on things which are impossible in and of themselves. So if Allah create a creator like himself? Impossible. Can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create a square triangle? Impossible. Can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take away his own life? It's impossible. Right? These are not to go back to the possibilities. Now, because Allah's existence is wajib, it's necessary, it's not mumkin like ours. طيب. The permanent committee, they asked this question. A Christian once said to a Muslim, can Allah create a God like himself? And the Muslim couldn't answer. So then they gave the answer, right, the permanent committee. And they explained that this is impossible. And then they give an advice at the end. It's not permissible for Muslims, especially those who lack knowledge and understanding, to enter in discussions and arguments with skeptics and misguided people. Including indulging in such debates without having sufficient knowledge could spark doubts within themselves. And a Muslim's inability to answer or offer their opponents a strong position will make them appear to hold weak views. And this is a beautiful response as well. Because in today's time we find online a lot of these kind of things, right? People are doing da'wah and they might not know these things. So it's not befitting someone who does da'wah, he doesn't know any better. And if you want more, go to Miftah Dar al-Sa'ada. Ibn Qayyim talks about a story about shaitan and a scholar and a layperson. طيب. Once we understand this argument, the omnipotence paradox, is already contradictory by nature because it's going to be confusing possibilities with impossibilities. So when we say Allah, Wallahu ala kulli shay means something possible, not something impossible. And so if you remember this, you know that they're just presenting an argument in order to cast confusion, because whatever side you pick, you already made the mistake. Second thing we know, and this is important to understand, the origin of this confusion, as some of the researchers nowadays they said, comes back to confusing possibilities that we can imagine to possibilities that can be in existence. And this is very important because Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, if you read his works, this is one of the arguments he spent a lot of time discussing, especially against the people of philosophy. There's two types of wujud. Something can exist fil dhihin, in your mind, and something can exist fil kharij, in real life. When you say, can God create a stone so heavy he can't lift, where is that possibility coming from? Wujud al-dhihni, laysa kal wujud al-khariji. So while it's mentally possible for you to imagine a rock so big in your head, or the idea of the question is invalid because fil kharij, it has no wujud, it has no existence because it's impossible. So impossibilities and possibilities are not to do just with what you can imagine, have to do with realities. And Ibn Taymiyyah, he spends a lot of time on this argument because most of the doubts that people have, they confuse the wujud al-dhihni, the mental existence of things, to the existence in the real life. So for example, in my head, I could try to imagine a square triangle. Right? Maybe I get a headache trying that. But does that mean it can exist? Someone may say, I can perceive it. Perceiving things doesn't mean they're possible. Not always. Right? Sometimes, right? It's important. Somebody can say conception. Yes, you can conceive something in your head. Doesn't always mean everything you can conceive is possible. And even the impossibility, you couldn't conceive in your mind. But you can get the question. Versus things which are possible. I can imagine a green sky. That's not mustahil aqlan. That's not impossible. It's possible, right? But Allah chose to make it blue. That's different. We're talking about like a married bachelor. I get the idea in my head. But in wujud, doesn't exist. Therefore, the shubha, the doubt comes from this. When you ask someone, is it possible? What are you talking about? Are you talking about possible in the real world? No, it's mustahil. Therefore, Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir wa laysa shay'. And if you're talking about mentally, then I'm telling you, you shouldn't be thinking about crazy things to begin with. Right? You should probably save your brain power for better use. Right? Because this is what they're coming with. And what would that even prove anyways? Right? Imagine we steal man then. What's the whole point? Allah can do that, therefore it doesn't exist. How does that? That's non sequitur. It doesn't go anywhere. It's non sequitur. How does it go from God can't do it, therefore it doesn't exist? No, what they're trying to say is Allah can do it, therefore He's not all powerful, therefore it doesn't exist. No. It's not going there. I'm going to see. That doesn't go. طيب, let's move on. Right? That's easy argument, right, to respond to. The omniscience paradox. This is one a little more tricky. And the omniscience paradox is a group of arguments, again, the atheist is going to present, in order to create confusion about Allah's ability to be all-knowing. Omni, all. So omniscient means all-knowing. So omniscience means Allahu al-alim. So now they're going to try to bring shubuhat ala ilmillahi subhanahu. Okay? And pay attention. See how they all connect to the Aqidah Asma wa Sifat? If someone today didn't study all the example parts, I'm telling you where they're coming from. Sharh Tahawiyya, Ibn Mu'izz al-Hanafi. Go back there, he answers these questions. That's why we study properly Aqidah, because the shubuhat to these people are coming from the people before us. And the ulama explain the Sharh Tahawiyya. We already studied Tahawiyya before, we have to review it. But if you go to Sharh Tahawiyya, Ibn Mu'izz al-Hanafi, he answers these doubts. I'm going to cite him right now too. Showing you the power of Aqidah. When we study properly, right, atheists can bring you doubts. It's going to be nonsense because you already know how to answer it because your Aqidah is good. The omniscience paradox, there are many versions of it. We're going to present two of them. The first one has to do with the argument from free will. Right? Most of us are familiar with it. Right? God's all-knowing and His ability to do all things. Or you can say the argument from free will is Allah being all-knowing and you having free will. I'm not going to address the second one just due to the time. But you see a lot of people ask that, how can I have free will if Allah is all-knowing? It's very common, right? It has to do with Qadr, has to do with Aqidah. Until today, atheists, they also run around with that issue too. But the problem is, those kind of arguments about God's being all-knowing, Allah being all-knowing, and us having free will have nothing to do with Allah's existence or not. Why? Because amongst the atheists, those who believe Allah is all-knowing, and we also have free will. You have to know that, right? Some people say, I left Islam because of this. Where did you go? Kufr, they have the same problem. So this person not even aql. Where are you running to? That person didn't even study the masala. Brother and sister, I'm telling you right now, some people say, I left Islam. Where'd you go? Atheists have the same debate. You can't run, but you can't hide. Some people, you laugh at them. It looks like that's a proof he didn't know the mawdu'. He's all hawa. He doesn't know nothing. We tell him, what's the reason? He couldn't tell you. It's the shahwat. I'm telling you this now, brothers and sisters, because when we talk to people, we have to not give everyone due credit that they're people who are using their brains. They're not. Sometimes it's something else happening. So you must also understand, like, why would someone leave Islam for these things? As we'll see today at the end of this class, if we have time, I'm going to mention Shaykh Mu'allimi's points as to the reason why people don't accept Islam and they follow falsehood. He mentions beautiful points about this. To speed up, the argument from free will, all it's saying is that Allah is omniscient, all-knowing, and has knowledge of the future. Thus, what challenges this will be His choices. So they're saying then, because God's knowledge of the future is perfect, and He therefore predicted or He has decreed everything in the future, He has no free will to challenge or change or to go against His choices. So what they're trying to say, God's knowledge, since it's perfect and knows everything in the future, it prevents Allah having choice about what to do in the future. Right? Which is, again, it's not a correct argument. So let's answer this one. The Cambridge companion to atheism, Patrick Grimm, he's the one who presents this amongst others, and he says the same point. If Allah or God is omniscient, He would know in advance all actions it would take. There can be no point at which such a God could make a genuine choice. Omniscience and freedom appear to be incompatible. So essentially, where the problem is coming is that is Allah's knowledge, being Al-Alim, all knowledgeable. Allah knows the past, the present, the future, the impossible, anything and everything Allah knows. Does that interfere with Allah's irada, wal qudra, His will and His ability? This is the question. So we're discussing Allah's ilm, His knowledge, and His qudra, His ability. It's essentially the discussion. And the flaw with it, as we'll see, is that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything in the future, does that mean He can't change His decision as to what He decreed or what will do? And the answer is no. Allah knowing everything doesn't mean He can't do everything. He can, for example, if He knows something's going to happen in the future, and then He decides, subhanahu wa ta'ala, to change that, is it impossible for Him to change it because He already decreed it? The answer is no. Allah's qudra and His knowledge are connected, but they're missing something in the equation here. Is irada, His will. So this discussion is going to come back to qudra, irada, wa ilm. And the first thing we have to know, some Muslim philosophers made a mistake when it comes to the ilm of Allah. I have to know that. The Ahl Bid'ah, the people of innovation, and philosophers, they made a mistake regarding Allah's knowledge. Some of them, they said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim. He only knows kulliyat wa la juziyat. Astaghfirullah azim. Allah only knows things universally, not particularly. That's, again, disbelief. Right? What verse is this? And this is unfortunate. Some of them went that way. And some of them went to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows everything. The universal particulars, everything, but His knowledge and His qudra are connected in a way that's not correct. So you have to understand, even this mawdu', if you do survey of all the views of Islam, you're going to find Hassan is the only one who's correct. Again, going back to the importance of Aqidah, some people want to downplay Aqidah and say, why are we studying this of atheists? Tayyib, go and tell me from your viewpoint, what are you going to give us? For example, is Allah capable of oppressing? We say yes, but He doesn't oppress. See the difference? Allah is capable of oppressing, right? But He doesn't oppress. He made haram for Himself oppression. But is He capable of doing it? Allah al kulli shayin qadir, yes. Because if Allah would not prohibit Him from Himself something He can't do. Okay, if it's another tinge, if you go on the other side, the Mu'tazila and others, they say what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He didn't decree it, He's not able to do it. La hawla wa la quwwata billah. No, this is wrong. It's poor. Sharh 40, right? We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala haramta dhulm an nafsi. Go to hadith. What does it mean Allah prohibited dhulm for Himself? Can Allah oppress? He can, but He doesn't. Because it's not with His essence. He's perfect. But the problem we have today, these conversations, brothers and sisters, if we don't understand it correctly, you'll have this problem. You'll go to the public and you'll get exposed. Because you're going to say some nonsense. Okay, because again, as soon as you admit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can't do something or not do something or then this is where discussion is. Right now we're talking about Allah's knowledge. So how do we answer this question? Easy. We have to separate Allah's knowledge from His will, His irada, and His qudra. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like the creation, firstly. And secondly, the point that we're going to highlight in this discussion applies to both the creation and the creator. But of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect, and us we're not. Imam Ibn Izz al-Hanafi writes in Sharh Tahawiyah, page 217, English translation. One of the he says, now I'm going to cite where he says. He says, so if Allah knows in Himself that He will do something, it does not mean that He has lost the power not to do it. And similarly, if He knows that in Himself that He will not do a thing, it doesn't mean that He has no power to do it. The same is true for human acts that He has ordained, and Allah knows best. And He's refuting the Qadariyah, those who have problem with Qadar, from the Mu'tazila. So what is He saying here? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that He'll do something in the future, it doesn't mean that He can't do otherwise. So Allah's ilm doesn't prevent Allah's qudra, but when Allah decreed something, He decreed it with His knowledge, and He wanted to happen bil irada. And if He can still do the opposite, His qudra, because He has qudra. It's like now, if we bring our example, وَلِلَّهِ مَثْلُ الْأَعْلَى, you knowing tomorrow you have to go to a doctor's appointment, doesn't prevent you from not going. Right? You having knowledge tomorrow you have a doctor's appointment, has no bearing on the fact that you can go or not go. It's not going to say, because the doctor said I have to be there tomorrow 9 a.m., I have to go. No, you don't have to go. You have a qudra to say I'm not going to go. And you have an irada to decide that. What's going on here, the atheist? He took out the irada from the equation. So therefore the ulama say there's no the la munazima bain ilm and qudra. There's no direct logical necessity here in this example between Allah's knowledge and His ability. Allah's knowledge informs His will. Allah does what He wills and He wishes based on knowledge and wisdom, and He has the qudra ability to do all things. Okay, to give you an example, if Allah decreed something, He decreed it bi'ilmihi wa iradatihi wa mashiyatihi wa ilmihi, His knowledge, wisdom, and His will. But doesn't mean Allah could not will the opposite. He could. He has the qudra to do all things. So this argument is flawed, both humanly and for Allah. And it also comes back to what we said before, فَلَا تَضْرِبُوا لِلَّهِ مِنْ الْأَمْثَالِ. They made a tashbih بين خالق ومخلوق. And it's even worse because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has the greatest example. Me and you, our qudra, our capacity to do things is not precluded or restricted by our knowledge of what will happen tomorrow. Even when that knowledge of tomorrow is more certain than other things. So you might say tomorrow you know what's going to happen. But some things you know, like you're going to go, no work tomorrow. Does that mean now that I can't go to work? See, what does the qudra have to do with that? How did that preclude your ability? All it did was, The only reason why you know something and you didn't do it, based on your mashiyah. So therefore, even us, when it comes to the ilm of iradat, we say ilm, then irada, that's how they go. Your knowledge informs your will, and your choice. It comes from there. And we're going to come to this later. So this argument is nonsense, and it's also deterministic. It assumes that knowledge of Allah determines the outcome and precludes the ability and will. Hence, there is a connection between Allah's knowledge and His ability, but not determinism between Allah's knowledge and ability. Okay, these two words. There's a connection between Allah's knowledge and His ability, but it doesn't mean Allah's actions Allah are going to be determined by His knowledge only. Knowledge, will, ability. Ability is always there. But that's what Allah says He does. يَفْعَلُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Right? Allah does whatever He wills, based on His knowledge, His wisdom, and all His perfect attributes. And He has the ability to do all things. But when He chose not to do something, He didn't do it because He didn't will it. Not because He couldn't do it. Everyone's with me? See this problem? This is very simple, but these people are going to come and say, look what he wrote. This guy, Grimm. So omniscience and freedom appear to be incompatible. Appear? To who? To someone who doesn't know Aqidah. Or someone who looks at shubuhat. How is that right? And even human beings will see, because we don't have time now, when it comes to the argument about human will and freedom and qadr, same problem. You knowing tomorrow you have a test does not have any bearing on the fact you're going to go there or not. What makes you get up from your bed is not the knowledge of the test. It's your will and choice to get up and go. You see? And your mom knowing you have a test tomorrow doesn't get you going there any faster. Here people today, they get this mixed up. It's one of the reasons, right? As we say, عِلْمُ اللَّهِ سَابِقْ وَلَا سَائِقْ. Allah's knowledge precedes you, doesn't drive you. What happened to the ikhtiyar, right? It's the whole point. It's like, oh, I've been forced to go to the test. If you got there without knowing, you shouldn't write the test. You're crazy, right? That's what we're going to say. Anyone got there, I don't know how? I'm sorry, you don't have to write the test. You're majnoon. Right? And so, tayyib, let's move along now. And let's talk about the second part. And this one's even more ridiculous in some ways. And again, if you notice in the pattern here, these are all just possible, or like you could say, very like doubtful arguments, conjectures, in order to do what? Make it look like Allah's existence is impossible, but really what they're doing, they're trying to weaken people's yaqeen. So this one is called the argument from the omniscience paradox, argument from experience. And what they're arguing here, Grimm says, again Patrick Grimm, if God is without moral fault, He cannot know lust or envy, thus cannot qualify as omniscient. So because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't make sins, He doesn't know what it feels like to sin? What is this kind of argument? And on face value, it may trick some people. One of them, he wrote an article, so look at the title of it. Why does God know what it feels like to ride a bike? What kind of paper is that? What kind of title? These are the kind of shubuhat they're writing and publishing. Right? And it's funny because when you look at them, you're thinking, like, look how Allah misguided these people. Look how they speak about Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now, let's get to this argument. It's a weak argument. But what is the problem here? Allah is not like the creation. So they're saying what? Allah, He can't sin. Therefore, He doesn't know what it feels like to sin. The question has to do with subjective experiences, not propositional knowledge. And I'm going to get to the point here by just summarizing this shubha and bringing that back, a beautiful benefit of Allah's beautiful names. This argument is rooted in the fallacy of resembling the Creator to the created, tashbih al-khaliq bil-makhluq. And this is because the argument says, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like us, He's not the creation, He's the Creator, He doesn't have the subjective experiences that we have. Right? So you have to understand, when you right now sitting in class, you have an experience, and I'm teaching, I have experience, you have experience, everyone has their own subjective experiences. So your subjective experiences, I cannot access personally as a human being. Objectively, we all know you're in the class. And what it feels like to be in class, only you know. And I have subjective experience, you don't have. Okay. So they're saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's not the creation, He might know objectively what's happening to the creation, but subjectively, does He know? Means, does He know what it feels like to be a creation, feeling what they're feeling? And so therefore, if we say Allah can't, because He's not the creation, by virtue of Him not being the creation, therefore Allah is missing something of knowledge. Therefore He's not Al-Alim. So it's a lot of ifs, right? A lot of if oriented. And I would say most people will not be convinced by this, because it's already based on fallacy. I'm a human being. Of course I cannot access your conscious mind. Allah is the Creator. He knows everything. وَعَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. This knowing subjective experience is shay. Is it something? It's mumkin, right? Khalas, Allah, He knows it. And how we're going to answer it? We're going to answer it two ways. Number one, if you fall into the fallacy of resembling the Creator to the creation, so it's already off the table. Because وَلَا تَضْرِبُوا لِلَّهِ الْأَمْثَالَ. Don't make examples for Allah. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. He's not like us. But also produces another problem. Right? But before going there, how can the creation have a subjective experience and Allah doesn't know it when He is the creator of them and their experience? How do you have an experience? Where did you get it from? Allah made it. So Allah doesn't know it? The experience that He created for you? It's funny. It's like saying, how does Allah know what it feels like to be hungry? Allah created hunger in you. وَاللَّهُ خَلَقَكُم مَا تَعْمَلُونَ. So what's the whole point of that? The point is, this is where they're going. As if I will access something God can't? That's first. And if we steel man them and say, sure, let's go with your argument. Therefore, where are your experiences coming from? What are their ontology and the source? No answer. So you can see, when you give them the argument, you concede, he doesn't have any reply. Well, we just said, we have, and if you go to the atheists, this is the really hard part. They don't even believe in conscious experiences. So I don't know where they're going with this, right? They just want to make our beliefs wrong. They don't believe our conscious experiences are even coming from anything but illusion. So the answer is based on fallacy. قال الله تعالى قد يعلم ما أنتم عليه. Allah, He knows what your condition is. Surah Nur, ayah 64. Allah قد يعلم ما أنتم عليه. Allah knows what you're upon. Shaykh Uthaymin in his tafsir, he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows what you are upon. Here it means in everything, in comfort and difficulty. كل ما نحن عليه من أحوال والأعمال فإن الله تعالى يعلمه. Anything we have, actions and conditions, Allah, He knows it. How can He not? ألا يعلم من خلق. This is a very important ayah. Does Allah not know His creation? وهو اللطيف الخبير. And He's all kind and courteous or and all aware. This point, al-khabir, we're going to come to this. This is the answer. ألا يعلم من خلق. How could Allah not know? Allah here means, does not Allah know means? Of course He knows what the creation is upon and what they're feeling. Hence why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's there for the creation. He knows. But when we look at the last two parts of that ayah, al-latif al-khabir, al-khabir is very important. Because this is the gist of the problem. They made Allah like us, right? Like a creation, the atheist. And they always do this. And the reason why is because who are they responding to mainly? Christians and Jews. And what do they believe about God? A man God. See the problem? That's why they have a problem. When they respond, they get caught in this. They get caught in the crossfire because these arguments are also weak. Al-Khattab, he writes, Asma wa Sifat, guys. Look at this power of this beautiful name attributes, right? His book called Sha'n al-Du'a. Sha'n al-Du'a is a book about Asma Allah wa Sifat. Page 63, Khattabi, Abu Sulayman al-Khattabi, 388 Hijri, right, from Ahl Sunnah al-Jama'ah. He says, Al-Khabir, what does it mean? Is the one who knows the essence of something and he sees its reality. And he says, it's like when you say akhbara means so Allah or so and so is more knowledgeable. Except that the experience in relation to the attribute of the creation is only used for a type of knowledge which involves testing and examination. Striving without a type of a priori knowledge. Us, when we have khibra, when we have experience, subjective experience, us human beings can only gain experiences through experience, right? Doing work. He said the knowledge of Allah, though, the exalted, is the same in terms of deep things or in relation to things which are subtle, in relation to what's manifest and apparent. It's all the same. The thing that differs is the perception and knowledge of humans who acquire it through the tools of senses or through the endurance of examination and thought. So like this, right, they are creation, whereas Allah is high above that. Us, we learn things through perception. This is called perceptual knowledge. Allah, He knows things propositionally as they are. So He doesn't need to, for example, feel pain to know what it feels like because He created us and the pain. But human beings can only feel pain by experiencing it. There you go. It's qiyas ma'a fariq, faulty analogy. Allah al-khabir. He knows the zahir wal khawas, the batin. And it's funny because we tell them that's our belief about Allah. But if you ask the atheist how many sifat Allah has, how many attributes, he tells you 3. He only works with 3. It's a fallacy of all fallacies. Every argument they base on God has 3 attributes. Omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent. We tell him, what about his hikmah? What about his mahabba? What about his khibra? Al-khabir, or his lutf and his kindness? See, brothers and sisters, very important. That's why Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah, we have the advantage because we know Allah best. So when someone comes and says, well, human beings only know how to ride a bike when they ride a bike. Yeah, that's humans. We're talking about us. I know that you can ride a bike. I don't know what it feels like unless I ride a bike. Allah created you and the bike. What are you talking about here? And your experience and everything else and the crash. Right? Everything. And you're coming in and talking about Allah like this. Brother and sister, you have to understand there's no intellectual humility here, right? There is intellectual humility. قياس مع الفارق. For Allah, there's no قياس التمثيل. قياس الأولى always. قياس الأولى. قياس of preponderance. No analogy of similarity. So they come and say, And when you read it even, sometimes you get shocked and thinking like, no, us, we don't believe that. But the question is, imagine you didn't study Aqidah and someone told you this. So God, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala know the experience of pain when He didn't feel it? Christians are going to come and say, that's why He came down to the earth. I'm like, see look how bad He is. God came down to feel our pain. What kind of God is that? That's why look at Him like, you're miskeen too. You do also do shirk. Right? Both of you, right? And you can notice, brothers and sisters, only Muslims, they say things like this. So, أَلَا يَعْلَمَ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ, beautiful ayah to respond to this. And of course, I believe most of us can see the weakness of this argument. And this is a benefit that most of the khitab, the address of the atheist is da'if. It's da'if lighaya. It's absolutely weak. Because it's based on conjecture and it's based on doubt. I want to finish today's lesson by talking about, because there's another one too, well, the third argument, but we'll leave it for maybe another time because we already kind of heard that one. Who created God? That's a third of the logical arguments. It's already nonsense, right? But I want to talk about something very important. After what we heard right now, some may say it looks very clear, brothers. Why would anyone be an atheist? But it's something we need to address, which is the importance of sincerity. Right? The sincerity when discussing the truth in Islam. Really, the problem we have today is that when you look at a lot of what we're talking about in these lessons, it becomes clear to somebody who's searching for truth. But people who are not sincere, means they're not looking for the truth, or they have preventatives in the way of this. Could be, as we'll see what they look like. They create this problem where they will hear the truth, but they will not follow it. Or they will listen to it, but they'll find some kind of way around it. Like today, we looked at so many arguments or some of the ideas of it, and you wonder, why would anyone even think that's a contender or a rational response to Allah's existence? قال الله تعالى سأصرف عن آياتي الذين يتكبرون في الأرض بغير الحق وإن يروا كل آية لا يؤمنوا بها وإن يروا سبيل الرشد لا يتخذوه سبيلا وإن يروا سبيل الغي يتخذوه سبيلا ذلك بأنهم كذبوا بآياتنا وكانوا عنها غافلين. So Allah tells us and reminds us that He will turn away, I shall turn away from my ayat, my signs, those who behave arrogantly on the earth without right. If they see all the proofs and evidences, yani ayat, they will not believe in them. And if they see the way of righteousness, they will not adopt it as a way. But if they see the way of error, they will take it as a way. That is because they disbelieved in our ayat, right? And they were heedless from them before. Chapter 7, verse 146. And this is very important. Arrogance is one of the preventatives for truth. And likewise, putting to knowledge, having lack of intellectual humility. قال الله تعالى بل كذبوا بما لم يحيطوا بعلمه ولما يأتهم تأويله. Surah Yunus, ayah 39. Allah says, nay, they denied that, the knowledge whereof they could not encompass, whereof the interpretation has not yet come to them. When the people who didn't understand لم يحيطوا بعلمه, his limited knowledge could not understand something, what did they do? Instead of making tawaqquf, the proper humble way, I don't know, كذبوا, they denied. وَلَمَّا يَأْتِهِمْ تَأْوِيلُهُ, and the evidence, interpretation didn't come yet. And this is like many people today, you explain something to them, they didn't get it. And when they go into it more, it becomes clear that they're wrong. But look how some people are. You oppose science, admitted you do that, oh, I can't believe in you. And this is the problem we find atheists, the scientism that's preventing them from entertaining what? The possibility there is more ways of knowing beyond that, like revelation. Another thing Allah says, وَلَمَّا جَاءَتْهُمْ رُسُلُهُمْ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ فَرِحُوا بِمَا عِنْدَهُمْ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. Surah Ghafir, ayah 3. And when the messengers came to them with clear proofs, miracles, Quran, evidences, they were glad, proud with that which they had of knowledge of worldly things. When someone today believes in the knowledge of the ilm al-shahada, the ilm of the present world, and he doesn't believe in the ilm al-ghaib, and when you bring them evidences that there is such, they will deny it and be happy with our knowledge. Like today, some people, the arrogance who say we have scientific inquiry, knowing full well that science can encompass all of knowledge, all of knowing. And this leads me to the point, Sheikh Al-Muallimi, rahimahullah, his fantastic, right, works, Abdul Rahman bin Al-Muallimi Al-Yamani. He has a book called Al-Qa'idu ila Tasheeh Al-Aqa'id. It's an excellent book in Aqidah, and he mentions in there some fantastic points. You could say he's the Dhahabi of our Asr. This was his nickname given to him, the Dhahabi, the Imam Dhahabi of our time. Al-Muallimi, rahimahullah, is very, very beneficial, his works. Here he has a chapter in the book. In that book, where he talks about causes وذكر أسباب عدم الاعتراف بالحق, reasons for people not acknowledging the truth. I mean, it has many other benefits in there, but I'm just going to read a summary of that chapter, because some may say at the end of this class, does it mean anyone and everyone who hears what we're presenting today will become a believer if they are sincere, asking Allah for guidance, not arrogant, etc.? Yes. So what are some of these reasons? He says, number one, that a person sees that his acknowledgement of truth entails that his acknowledgement or his view is wrong. So a person, when he's raised upon a religion, a belief, or doctrine, or opinion, whatever it may be, and he's raised by his teachers and educated like this way, and adheres to it for a long time, then it becomes clear to him that he's wrong. He finds it difficult to acknowledge. That's the first reason. People, when we grow up learning something, we feel hesitant to leave it. Familiarity, right? The affinity principle, we call it. Right? When you're familiar with something, you feel comfortable with it. But familiarity doesn't mean anything, because you can become familiar with something else. Right? So what happens? My whole life I've been doing this. And it's wrong. So this is the junction where someone gets stuck. He says, therefore, if his forefathers, his masters, his followers, or people were all on something, then it becomes clear to him that it's false. He sees that their shortcomings entail his own. So his acknowledgement of their misguidance or error is an acknowledgement of his own shortcomings, to the point that you will see a woman in her time, if she comes across some issues in which is disagreement about their mother, the believer Aisha or the Sahaba, she begins to defend Aisha for no reason other than Aisha was a woman like her. He's talking about how people are. People resorting to this kind of group thing, where women defend women, men defend men, cultures. So the first of them is that when people are faced with the truth, they're at that junction, they have to make a choice. Am I going to acknowledge what is superior, more correct, or am I going to adhere to what I'm familiar with? And a great example, Salman al-Farisi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and the story of Salman's Islam. It's a book, Dr. Salih translated the whole hadith in Muslim Ahmed. In that, brothers and sisters, great benefits of guidance. Salman al-Farisi said, I was a fire worshipper. The one day his father sent him out for an errand, he said, I passed by the Christian church. I saw them worshiping Allah. He said, immediately I knew their religion is better than mine. We're worshiping fire, they're worshiping Allah. The day he comes back, his father put him into prison, right? Shackled him or imprisoned him, and he ran away later. That part of the story immediately showing what? The fitrah is always going to be active. Second reason, he says, Mu'allimi, that a person may have attained a prestige, fame, or livelihood through falsehood, and that therefore it's difficult for him to admit that it's false, thus losing his benefits. And I told you guys a story of this. Imam al-Qayyim, when he argued their priest, in his kitab, Hidayat Hiyara, he mentioned that story. That he argued with a big priest, Christian priest of his time, convinced him Islam is true, and the priest said, well, what can I do? If I become Muslim, I'm going to be ignorant. I don't know Nahu, I don't know Tafsir, I don't know anything. How am I going to make money? And Al-Qayyim was shocked, and he told him, this is the kind of response Allah can provide for you, and even if you become poor, you go to Jannah. How would you sacrifice? But he didn't accept because of that. This, we must understand, brothers and sisters. A lot of atheists are living in affluence. كَلَّا إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لِيَطَغَى أَرَّآهُ اسْتَغْنَى. Mankind, he thinks himself self-sufficient, right? Or transgressors, sees himself to be self-sufficient. Therefore, affluence and atheism go hand in hand. Fir'aun, we said, the best example. He was rich. Musa made dua, Allah take away his wealth. And now, Phil Zuckerman and other secularists have argued that atheism, why is it so prevalent, and secularism in the Western nations? Once you get something called existential security, means you're not scared for your life, you're not in poverty, no war-torn area, you have food, drink, comfort, and you start thinking, I don't think I need Allah. Right? Some will say, why do I need God? You're swimming in this bounty. What do you mean? Right? You only think it this way when you have everything. That's when you go to the places where there's no money, wealth, Iman is stronger, because when you brush by death, you know you're meeting Allah. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. Wallah, brothers and sisters, we have to understand, us as Muslims here in the West, same thing, right? It's not like someone sitting. Why do all atheists live in Oxford and Cambridge and California? Sitting in ivory towers, big houses. I don't know if there's a God. Yeah, I see that when you're in the street. Right, let's see if you can see that. No atheists in the foxholes, what they say, right? Third aspect, arrogance. We already covered that. A person who says maybe ignorant or false, of ignorance or falsehood, then someone else comes along and explains the evidence to him. He believes that if he admits it, it means that he's admitting his own shortcomings. So the person who tries to guide him, he tells him, right, when this person tells him this, that this is why, he said that he tells him that you're wrong and I'm right, because of that arrogance. He said, this is why you find someone amongst those who claim to be scholars, those who find it easy to admit error if the truth has been revealed to him through their own research and investigation. And this is difficult, someone else has revealed it to them. Okay, guys, psychology of doubt. If I told you you're wrong, you get angry. But if you found it yourself, like, okay. See, human nature. That's why sometimes you don't always have to tell someone they're wrong. You just give them a book and say, read this. And say, read it in quietly. You look around and say, okay, I'm wrong. But if you tell them in public, brother, you're wrong, like, no. You're going to be like, stand up and say, how dare you? Right? And this is what you notice. This is a very good point, right? A psychology. But imagine, Mu'allimi is addressing what? And Mu'allimi is addressing the psychology of the doubt. The fourth one, envy. And this occurs when someone else has revealed the truth and they see their admission of the truth as the admission of that person's merit, knowledge, accuracy. And this makes them feel great in the eyes of people. and many of those who follow their example. You'll find something among those who claim to be scholars, those who are eager to find fault with others, even falsely out of envy, and attempt to diminish their standing in the eyes of people. And this is true. That if someone else told you right, you feel, oh, he's better than me, he gets envious. The same way, another person who may guide them, or even the person who's knowledgeable knows that he's wrong, but what happens? How can I admit someone knows more than me? And when it comes to atheism, brothers and sisters, what's the biggest issue? As we're going to see next week when we talk evolution. Is there a coincidence most atheists are white, young men, and older men, not women? Is it a coincidence they all believe in evolution? When Darwin says in the origin of descent, or descent of man, that the white race, Caucasian race, is the pinnacle of human development? You don't believe in brothers? We're going to see that. Very important. Pay attention to that. Now you know why they hold on to teeth and nail. We can't admit a non-white, possibly, right, prophet from an Arabian land is going to tell us how to live. Well, they used to before. Why suddenly you forgot? Brothers and sisters, this is very deep. This one part we have to understand that. The white hegemony can't let go of knowledge production to who? To somebody else that look like us? Is that why Isa looks white in their the Christ of church and the historical Jesus are not the same? You guys know this, right? There's the Christ of church, the one in the picture in the church, and there's a real Isa who's from Arabia, or right, Palestine, has brown hair, brown skin, not white. Very important. These are points you can't ignore. Billahi alaykum, you can't. That point we have to understand. Hence, and Mu'allim has more, but I'll stop with this. We must not always conflate knowledge and guidance. Guidance is the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yu'tihi man yasha. And one of the ways to help people over it, ask Allah. If you're sincere, you will make dua to Allah. Allah answers those who called Him, Allah's al-had, the guide. But today what's happening, as you can see these elements, there are other aspects. Human beings are complicated. They're not all rational. And sometimes what happens is we forget the heart, mind, body connection. When you're talking to people, you're thinking straight evidence. And you may say, many people didn't even hear these things before. It's like when you hear the non-Muslim or the ex-Muslim who said, I left Islam, and you tell them, what did you know about Islam that led you to leave it? And so they'll tell you an argument, whatever they scrubbed off the internet. And we tell them, this argument that you have, did you know when you left Islam or learned after? Yeah, you Googled after, right? Okay, so therefore you didn't leave Islam for a reason. Allah, you see, they Googled after, they already left it. Okay, how could you leave Islam first, then you look for evidences, right? You're not going to tell me, I was so knowledgeable. You were knowledgeable, why'd you leave? Just like Heraclius, when Abu Sufyan asked Heraclius, Heraclius asked Abu Sufyan, does anyone leave his faith when they enter it? He said, no. He said, that's the guidance of our true faith. When the true faith enters the heart, that's what happens. See that? He said, no, they don't leave. But here we're today, someone, I left. We have first question, what were you, background? Can I explain to you? And very important questions. Weak apostasy, strong apostasy. So if somebody was an Ahmadi or a Shia or another group was on the fringe of the connections of Islam, that's called weak apostasy. He wasn't practicing proper Islam anyways. And some may come today and say, I'm an atheist. Ask him, well, how would you grow up? Most time he'll be like, I grew up as an atheist. Khalas. That's what I was expecting. So we must understand these points, because when we talk to people, we must also be able to give that layered da'wah. But this is a beautiful benefit to explain that even Muslims who may have these confusions, right, have these problems. One more point before we for salah time. Mu'allim, he continues and he mentions a beautiful point as he continues to get to the point where the Quraysh, he used them as example, Surah Anfal, ayah 32. And he uses example of human nature. He says, Quraysh, they said, Allah says, وَإِذْ قَالُوا, they said, وَإِذْ قَالُوا اللَّهُمَّ إِنْ كَانَ هَذَا هُوَ الْحَقَّ مِنْ عِنْدِكَ فَأَمْطِرْ عَلَيْنَا حِجَارَةً مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَإْتِنَا بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. They said, remember, when they said, Quraysh, oh Allah, if this should be true from you, then rain down upon us stones from the sky or bring us painful punishment. So he says, Mu'allimi rahimahullah, whenever a person with a passion is presented with evidence, anyone has desires, that's number 5, desires, following the desires. He said, whenever someone who has desires is presented with evidence from the opponents or something that weakens evidence of his supporters, he finds it difficult, becomes agitated, becomes enraged, and quickly resorts to rioting and rebelling. And he says about the evidence of his opponents, this is false, this is contradictory, this is wrong. And the reason is coming from that desire. And he uses this point. The Quraysh, whenever they ask, for example, Oh Allah, should it be true from you, then rain down on stones. They were shown many signs. Did they take it? No, they would get more and more upset. So he said, then it's sufficient for you to know about the polytheism what Allah said. And this is the point we have to know. Sometimes it's not even about what you're presenting, it's the fact that you're presenting anything to begin with. Right? So sometimes you might find that you present somebody's weakest argument, you took the shahada. Right? You might think you're a good da'iyah, but you know that you're just the guy who was looking for guidance anyways. You could have just taken him to eat pizza, he would have been guided. Right? So that's some people. And some people, you talk to them, you got the best argument. You dug in the research, you found the best argument, the person said, no, it's wrong. And you're thinking, like, how can it be wrong? And then you notice this point. It sometimes have to do with the people. That's why Allah is just. He judges everyone according to their background and what they believe and what they did. But Allah is just. The person who denied truth based on falsehood, he will be deserving punishment. And whoever accepted it, there are many reasons for the acceptance. Next week, inshallah ta'ala, we'll take a look at some of the evidential arguments, right? Because there are more logical ones, but these are the most common one. As for the doubt who created Allah, we already said that is a fallacy because it has to do with conflating the creator with the creation, same thing, tashbih and khaliq and makhluq. So when the atheists say who created Allah, just to give you a summary of the answer, that answer is invalid, the question is invalid because you can't create the creator because by definition he is uncreated. It's like saying who cooked the cook, right? So who baked the baker, it doesn't make sense. And also there's a problem with this, which is that the atheist falls into contradiction. Dr. Abdul, he mentions this point, Aswadi. He says if you ask the atheist, like people like Richard Dawkins, he will answer in his book, The God Delusion, book, he says in there, who created God? This is his famous argument, which everyone laughed at, right? The atheists included. It's a ridiculous argument. But the same time, when you ask him who created the universe, no answer. You can't answer that. He says, why are you asking why? Who, sorry. So when they asked him who made the universe, he said, why are you asking who? But you asked who created God. So how come we can ask God that question, Allah, but you can't ask the creator that question? You see, this is called haida and jawab. This is one of the fallacies when you evade the question. Okay, Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah, they tell us that, ulama and salaf too, when you debate someone, if he evades that question, it's a sign of defeat. Right, so go Google all of those questions they ask the atheists. Who made the universe? Why are you asking who? And they get so angry and defensive. Why can't I ask who? Why you get angry? Another question they ask, why? Why can't it be God? No, it can't be, but it could be aliens. Right? We have to think about this. Today's last part I talk about sincerity, right? Think about the sincerity of Richard Dawkins. He's ready, and he said it on camera and on tape, that we could come from the aliens. The universe is created by aliens, but it cannot be by Allah. You're going to tell me that guy's mukhlas, that guy's sincere? See the difference? He's telling us that's okay answer. But Allah, no, impossible. No. 101 arguments you're going to bring. Aliens, perfectly logical. No scientific evidence. Just made it up. So then you can see when Allah misguides someone, فَأَزَاقَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُمْ, Allah misguides their hearts. So inshallah, with this much, subhanaka bihamdika.